It always comes to this. More nice shit. Hello there guys, here to do another tattoo progress update today. Where I last left off, I believe I had showed off the relined hand rows and all the thorns on my wrist and forearm and into the armpits, and there's one up here on my shoulder and some on the upper arm, so lots of lining. Lining doesn't tend to really change much when it heals. Like, if it looks bold when it's lined, it'll basically stay bold after the fact. So here you can see these have been peeled now for a couple days, and they stayed about what they were. They're just a little less shiny and wet looking. So other than the fact that they were shiny and wet looking, the fresh lines didn't change much. No shock there. Super easy heal. Nothing to it. Whenever you're just doing line work, I barely even remember that I've been tattooed. It doesn't even matter if it's a lot of line work. Now, a lot of line work can hurt a lot, and it can feel bad in the moment, but because you're just doing lines, you're not doing a whole ton of trauma to the skin. It's very precise, and there's less bruising too, I find, typically, than if you're mag shading something. So lines tend to heal really easy, without much effort, and very quickly as well. So I also had a session with Rick last week that I showed off that I had been a little bit nervous about how it would heal, and it tended to heal pretty much perfect. Perfect for as much as we're doing. There were no real complications. I was concerned that there would be because I've had some dry patchiness or maybe eczema of some kind. I've never really had eczema before, but now where my skin is, you know, as a base layer, like black or dark gray or whatever the fuck blackout is, it's really hard to see if you have like skin redness. But I could tell that there was something going on in there. So I actually ordered, it just came here the other day, an eczema relief moisturizer. So it's not like a cortisol cream to like treat eczema necessarily, but it's more like it gets rid of dry patchiness particularly, and soothes the skin and all that shit. I'll put a picture of that in here. It's made by Eczema, which is the company that makes Aquaphor. Aquaphor being my my go-to healing method. I've always used Aquaphor, even when I dry heal in the later stages when things are doing really well and it's all sealed up. I'll always just do a light coat of Aquaphor. I have Aquaphor as a daily staple these days. I've got 4 jars of it in my my cupboard right now, and a jar seems to last me a couple months. But if you just get tattooed once every now and then, a jar of Aquaphor will last you ages. That being said, a lot of people don't like to use the jar. A lot of people like to use the squeeze tubes, which they didn't make for quite a while, but they just started making a squeeze tube version of Aquaphor, so you can just squeeze out a small amount of it. The reason why people don't like using the tubs quite often is because if you're dipping in there with your fingers, whatever you've got on your fingers will contaminate the jar, and it can cause problems later. Say you put something in there that shouldn't be in there, some bacteria that you couldn't even see, because we can almost never see bacteria, if ever, and then later you're rubbing that into a fresh tattoo, then it's not going to be so good. So the guys here at the shop, they use tongue depressors to grab out their green glide, for example, so they're not dipping in with their fingers. Even when your hands look clean, you could be contaminating the product. Anyway, I use the jar. I'm not that concerned. I make sure to wash my hands. I'm pretty good with knowing my body and stuff anyway, as I've gone over, and I've only ever had 2 tattoo infections, so I'm not overly concerned with infection at this stage of my tattoo career, we'll say. Though, if I was, I would know what to do anyway if I seen the warning signs of infection. Once you've been through that once or twice, it never really leaves you. Anyway, so yeah, everything healed up fine on my arm. We'll be back onto my arm again next week. Rick and I took a bit of a detour. You can probably already tell. You can see a little bit of it sticking out here. We spent some time working on the top of my head this week. I'll show it off in just a minute here. We did about 2.5 hours on that guy. That's realistically about a 4 to 5 hour piece up there if you want to do it super detailed. So we're going to do another session on that before we're done. Every time I've done that, so the first time I did that tattoo, it was one session for lines. Rick likes to do a layout day. I've gone over that. Then we did the dark shading. Then we did the midtones and highlights. So it was no shock that we did a session of dark tones, and now we're going to do a session of midtones and highlights. That's just his method, and it works great for black and gray. So that's a great way to do it. He can kind of see where everything is, where it's dark, and then put the lighter shades in. He has a very particular process, and as I've told him many times, if you die and I have to try and reschedule your projects, we're fucked, because almost no other artist at this shop or in this city is going to know how to follow what you're doing. Not because it's so beyond them, but because Rick works in such a strange, different kind of way that no other artist around here works in. I know there are some other artists that works that way, light to dark, and shading certain parts. A lot of artists want to get piece, like they want to work up and just fill in a piece. So like, say they would do the face. If they only did that same 2.5, 3 hours, they would just do the face that day. Then they would do the ears, so that the client's leaving with a product. Where with Rick, he doesn't really give a fuck about that. He's not really looking for the Instagram post. If you've ever seen Rick's Instagram page, he does have one. It's not pretty. He doesn't take the best photos, and most of his stuff is in process. We actually made him a professional page here at the shop, where we just posted his healed stuff and fresh stuff, finished stuff, I should say. So healed and finished day ones. Out in the wild or whatever, and we just took nice photos of them, because he does some things that are like world-class pieces and could be award-winning pieces, but he just can't take a photo, and he doesn't really give a crap to do any of the pageantry around social media. So we don't keep it real updated though. But that's Rocky Mountain Rick. His own personal Instagram page is just full of just the worst photos you've ever seen. And he does it almost gleefully. And I've said to him before, like, dude, your photos are terrible. And it always makes him smile. Like, I think he takes some joy in it. Anyway, yeah. So he does things in a very particular way. And he's not doing things for the day one Instagram photo. And I think that a lot of people, they do too much these days, just because they're trying to get the picture, or they do things that they shouldn't do or won't work as well because they're trying to get the picture. And I feel like better than that is just making sure that the tattoo is as good as it could be. And so I think that I'm hoping that there'll be a push for that kind of tattooing to come back. But with how incentivized it is to get likes and shares and saves and all that shit on Instagram, I don't really feel like that's going to happen anytime soon, but hopefully. So I'll just show it off finally, because he's been peeking out here. We did go quite a bit darker. The reason why we went darker this time is because, first off, I like it darker. I do like this tattoo being darker. I was always a proponent of it being darker. We made it darker the last time too, but it lightened up a bit, and we were only using dynamic black at that point. We weren't using Panthera at that time. I think the last time we touched this guy up was in 2019, and we didn't have Panthera here at the shop. That being said, I don't think that that's going to keep it from lightening up. That's not even the deal. The deal is he put a lot more black in there than there ever was. So I'll put some pictures of what this tattoo looked like along the way. in here, but you'll see that there's just more black space than there is negative space or light shading now. So in those spots of the lighter areas, or the negative, it's not actually negative. There are some softer tones in there that you can't really see as clearly anymore, because when you do like a soft black and gray, if everything's going to fade at all, and as we've seen, my head has faded, a lot of those shades are going to be the first to go. So he's going to do darker midtones as well. So the bat's probably going to have more of like a dark gray, brownish kind of complexion when it's all said and done. And of course all that red that barely looks red next to the fresh black. It's funny, that stuff still looked red before we did the fresh black. But when you put fresh black next to anything, it makes it look washed out. So, for example, this black is purposely patchy that we did on my head here, and it's next to this fresh black here. You can easily see how we're going to be able to get darker black over top of that, or a different black over top of that. But that's besides the point. I already like this bat, probably the most I have. But even just putting the white highlights and the red in the blood and the eyes again, I think is going to make this very, very striking again. I have higher hopes for it this time. I've always had thoughts that maybe when I bleached my hair, it might have lightened my scalp. I don't know if that's a science that I can prove, but then again, there aren't that many people with full head tattoos out there that can speak to that, right? So, but I bleached my hair once this last time I had hair, and it was a mistake. I don't think I want to be blonde anymore, personally, but because I ended up dyeing it brown again anyway. But that being said, I think when you bleach your hair, and I think that guy, I've had my hair bleached over top of that probably 5 or 6 times since I've had it touched up. I do wonder if it lightens the scalp. Rick also thinks that the hair follicles might over time push some ink out. And there's just the fact that your head is always exposed to the sun, even when you're wearing hair, whatever, even if you have hair, I feel like you see the sun a lot more with your head than you realize. And so it's getting more tanned than most of you, where I put a hoodie on or a long sleeve and the sun's not really going to be able to bake my tattoos, but our hair isn't quite the same way, so it doesn't completely block the sun out. So there's all kinds of things that could be going on there, but I have a feeling that this time, since we're going to go more primarily black and even darker midtones, I have a feeling that this guy is he's gonna stand the test of time better. So yeah, lots more to do on my head over the next few months here. I've got another session on my head coming up in about 8, 9 days. We're going to be doing the experimental first. This will be the first time we've ever covered something and in 3 weeks covered it again. So I'm really curious to see how that works. I think it's going to be a really positive result. I think we're going to be able to do whatever the fuck we want. And I think once I can show that you can do this in 3 weeks, potentially, I think this cover-up route becomes even more conceivable and possible for a lot of the more impatient people. And for me, it's not because I need to do it right now. I'm just morbidly curious. This is another science experiment for me. I am very curious if we can do this. If I didn't think we could do it, I would probably just do a second pass on this black and then let it settle for 3 or 4 months. But because I'm pretty goddamn sure that we can cover that with white and black right away, and then red too, we're just going to take a swing at it and see what happens. Anyway, I'll be talking to you guys again soon. I'll be showing off my next session with Rick, and then one more session with Terry. Terry and I are skipping a week, so there won't be an update with Terry this week, but lots more to come with him. Just pacing it out so I don't get burned out. Anyway, I'll talk to you guys again soon. Have a great day.